We're on our way to Nordhausen in Thuringia. In September, a new mayor will be elected there. The far-right candidate has a good chance of becoming the city's first AfD mayor. For the far-right populist party, this election is a key step toward its goal of taking over regional offices and state parliaments in Germany. Just recently, for the first time, an AfD politician became a district administrator, while another became mayor of a small town. This made international headlines. Why do so many voters trust a party that uses populist slogans and has right-wing extremists in its ranks? Do the other political parties and civil society have any ideas on how to counter the AfD's success?
And above all, we want to know, does anyone here have a plan to fight far-right populists?
6 candidates are running for mayor. In addition to the political debate, there is also personal hostility between the city council, the district council, and the district administrator. This annoys locals. The AfD candidate, Jörg Prophet, on the other hand, presents himself as a maker and shaker. He recently was the star guest at a far-right extremist event in front of an audience including neo-Nazis and members of the Reichsbürger movement. Apparently, he has no problem with this and dodges questions about it during a campaign rally.
I'm a father, an entrepreneur, I'm a husband, a grandfather, and yes, I'm also an AfD member.
Current mayor Alexandra Rieger of the SPD is running again. It's not an easy campaign for her. She says people take out their frustration with federal politics in local elections, and she understands some of their logic. She says politicians have to find other ways to involve the public.
We have many projects, for example, an urban planning project where you try to do something good for the residents. Then you hold committees and nobody comes. It's only when something is about to happen that people say, oh no, we don't want that. As politicians, we have to find new ways, locally and nationally, to reach the electorate. Because otherwise we will have a lot of non-voters.
Rieger says the best way to tackle right-wing populism is to get closer to the people. That alone isn't enough for Carsten Meyer. He's the Green Party's mayoral candidate. We met up with him on the Petersburg Hill, where the old town was razed by British bombers in the last days of the Second World War. Carsten Meyer can't get his head around the fact that the AfD is now gaining support in Nordhausen, because it is a party that doesn't always clearly distance itself from Germany's Nazi past.
Now all the dissatisfied people have a party they can vote for. That was definitely the Left Party 20 years ago. But they behave differently. And wherever you go, there's a lack of people who want to take on political responsibility. That is much more apparent in the established parties. With the AfD, you don't have to take on much responsibility. You just have to be against something.
Meyer fears that the local university could lose many international students if the mayor comes from the AfD party. He comes from Western Germany and would like to see more active political debate.
Democracy thrives on the fact that we are diverse, that we have different opinions. But if there is anything we have in common, it's that we don't argue enough. That is, in the sense of constructive discussion, and making it clear that the CDU, the SPD and the Greens have different blueprints for society. But the AfD has none at all.
Meyer's plan to counter far-right populism is live democratically. Wilma Busch is an entrepreneur and sits on the Nordhausen City Council for the Green Party. She notes that the political climate has changed.
Through this populist attitude and the AfD's use of language, people seem to be taken in and react accordingly. The interaction is rougher and no longer constructive. Just last week, we had an incident when a local cafe reported someone had drawn a swastika on its walls. It's unbelievable that this could happen, but it's happening.
Nevertheless, Wilma Busch believes in keeping the opportunity for dialogue open for everyone. That's the only thing that helps. Her plan? Communication. The Left Party has not put up a mayoral candidate, even though one of its politicians now serves as state minister in Thuringia. They didn't turn up for our interview. Too bad, as we would have liked to ask them why they aren't taking part in the elections.
We did not ask the AfD simply because we don't expect to get a proposal to fight far-right populism from them. After all, populism is part and parcel of their business model.
But we did ask Nordhausen residents. Many said they wanted to vote for the AfD. But hardly anyone wanted to repeat this statement on camera.
I don't know him personally, but it looks like he's making his own decisions, not blindly following the AfD directive. I would like to see a candidate who is likely to say to our federal government, boys, this is the limit and no further. The AfD is the old Nazi Germany revived. I don't believe the people who deny this. I don't want history to repeat itself, but the Greens aren't helping the situation by banning cars from one day to the next.
People's discontent runs so deep that there are many protest votes for the AfD for this reason alone. Some people don't even look at their election manifesto. Does this worry you? Yes, that worries me.
Many people agreed. Less than 6 kilometers from the city lies the former concentration camp, Mittelbau-Dora, notorious for its brutality and inhumane conditions. Every year, more than 60,000 people from all over the world come to visit the memorial site. Survivors, relatives of the forced laborers who were imprisoned and murdered, school children. Annette Dremel is the deputy director of the memorial. So far, they have worked successfully with Nordhausen mayors, planning and carrying out events together. The city knew about its difficult legacy. Now Annette Dremel is very concerned.
Of course, there is a lot of unease. I have also experienced this in the last few weeks. Many relatives come here, especially in the summer months, who are perhaps passing through or on holiday and want to return to the place where family members were persecuted or died. They see the posters in the city and ask what that means and ask what the mood is like. And when I tell them that there is an AfD candidate here who has relatively high approval ratings, they express great concern.
Through her work, Annette Dremel has a heightened awareness of political developments, and she eyes the election with trepidation.
We are afraid that the memorial's basic values are under threat, being pro-diversity, against racism or anti-Semitism. We see all that as under threat.
Annette Dremel says it is important to be able to recognize false slogans and ideologies, which is why her formula is educational work. The first signs of disagreement between the memorial and the AfD have already appeared. There are some 2,000 former forced laborers and Soviet troops buried at this cemetery in Nordhausen.
For the people of Nordhausen, this graveyard was considered a foreigner's graveyard. Over the years, it fell into disrepair and became overgrown. In 2019, the city decided to give the cemetery a facelift and turn it into a proper memorial. The AfD was opposed to spending large sums of money on the project, and its opposition went down well with the electorate.
Instead of renovating the information plaques and turning the mass grave into a dignified memorial, the AfD in Nordhausen merely wants to set up a park bench.
And then there is another group that often finds itself in the sights of far-right populists, immigrants. The organization Schrankenlos, like thousands of similar groups throughout Germany, does its best to hold a protective hand over immigrants.
Immigrants and refugees, like 28-year-old Zaki Hussaini from Afghanistan. After just a year in Germany, the environmental engineer speaks excellent German. Young, well-educated people like Hussaini could be a boon for the local economy. But people from abroad are not always made to feel welcome here.
There are some very simplistic threats, like swastikas painted on the walls or aggressive slogans inside and outside the refugees' accommodation centers. The lowlight so far was the severed heads of pigeons or even pigs being thrown onto the balconies, accompanied by chants and shouts, so that the people who live there can hardly sleep because they are under constant surveillance.
Keine ruhige Schlaf mehr finden und ständig in Beobachtung befinden.
Stefanie Tiepelmann-Halm says people are increasingly afraid to open their mouths.
Mit Trägern, mit verantwortlichen Personen.
What strikes me very often in discussions is that officials cite the need for political neutrality. I find this shocking. We are not politically neutral. We all have constitutions and guiding principles. Our organizations have a cosmopolitan outlook that promotes tolerance and diversity. It makes me angry to hear people say we have to be politically neutral, so we can't take sides.
Stefanie Tiepelmann-Halm says the best way to counter far-right populism is to take a stand. Our last port of call is a man who knows the city well and what makes the locals tick. Thomas Müller is a historian who worked as a journalist here for many years. He tries to explain why Eastern Germany seems to be such fertile ground for far-right populists.
I think this is a classic case of Eastern German attitudes. For me, the basic political atmosphere is that the electorate would like a strong political party and leader in charge that sorts out some of the alleged chaos. In general, discourse, debate, discussion, all these words that have positive connotations in Western Germany have quite negative connotations in the East. People here don't like disagreement and debate. People roll their eyes when someone speaks up and just thinks the debate is being needlessly prolonged. They're not really used to discussing things here.
Thomas Müller says it took him a long time to recognize the scale of the issue.
First of all, we have to accept that a lot of people are right behind the AfD's policies. For many years, we thought they were just hangers-on or protest voters. Time and again, they were seen to be protest voters. But no, these are people who think exactly the same way as the AfD.
Müller says the country needs more politicians with clear visions and opinions, and to get them across, charisma. Our research yielded 6 approaches that might help counter far-right populism. There are probably more, but there is no panacea.